Marhaba, Mes al Hayy. I have converted to the wonderful word of Islam, the true faith, the only faith, thanks to the wise words of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Today in the UK, 6 men are being charged with trying to commit acts of terrorism which were foiled by the secret services or whoever James Bond works for. And their names were Irfan Nasir, Irfan Khalid, Ashik Ali, Rahin Ahmed, and they were all between the ages of 25 and 30, and they were all British. And this on top of last year in December, where 12 other British men were foiled in an act which a judge said might have led to catastrophic events. There seemed to be a number of British Muslims committing terrorist attacks against their fellow Brits, and I think it is important when you're talking about Islam that you do put in a little disclaimer. As annoying as disclaimers are, I think it is necessary to say that terrorism in Islam is absolutely the minority. Let's be honest, you are probably 1,000 times more likely to get hit by a car than to die from a terrorist attack. So, you know, it's not necessarily a symptom of Islam, but the question for me is, why is it that so many young Brits are happy to die for Muslims abroad and kill the people that they grew up with? Something is not quite right here. Why are homegrown people doing it? Normally homegrown is a good thing, if you know what I'm saying. But these guys just did it anyway, and I have to ask the question, is this at the fault of Islam, or is it because we as a country are not doing enough to integrate them? I think one of the reasons why a very small minority of British Muslims become radicalized is because we don't have a zero tolerance policy on terrorism. When it comes to Islamic terrorism, we sometimes say that it might have been provoked, and that perhaps somebody else is at fault, and that perhaps it's completely about geopolitics instead of jihad, which the murderers on 7/7 and the Madrid bombings completely talked about Islam in their goodbye videos, shall I call them. So for some reason, the media is at fault about this as well. When I talked about the Muslims who have been are in court at the moment, in the article I read about it on the BBC, not once is Islam or Muslim used once, the term, and in a way I think that's relatively responsible, because we don't want to associate all Muslims with terrorism, and I think that's a fair thing to do. But why is it we keep on pretending that there is nothing to do with a few verses in the Quran? We can't keep on giving Islam a free pass, or any religion a free pass, for any of the horrible things that they may do. And I think a good way of talking about this is the way in which people talked about Anders Breivik, and I think he's a piece of shit. But I find it really bizarre how every time he's described, people vehemently use the words nationalist and far right and anti-Islamic. When it comes to him, it's motivated by ideology and not because he's a crazy fuck. But when they talk about the Islamic terrorists, they are all crazy fucks, the media like to say to you, and I'm sure they are crazy fucks, but Islam played a part in it, and Breivik is a crazy fuck, and his nationalism did play a part in it, but the media is happy to associate all people who have a problem with Islam with him, whereas they don't want to do it for Muslims, and that's fair enough. But if we keep on never linking Islam with terrorism when the evidence is in front of our faces, we're going to allow potential terrorists to not come upon scrutiny, and the media will have you think that you are just as likely to die in a terrorist attack from a Christian or an atheist than you are in an Islamic terrorist, which is obviously bullshit. There have been 2 terrorist attacks in perhaps the last 20 years by Christians or atheists, whatever you want to have, Timothy McVeigh and Anders Breivik, yet the media danced with joy when Breivik came along, because now that they could say that terrorist attacks come in all faiths. And I want to read you a couple quotes that the lovely BBC provided, talking about Breivik from reporters from around the world, mostly in, well, I'm going to talk about the ones from the Middle East because these are quite funny. Ralph Shri in Lebanon's Al Anwar says, "It has become clear from the Norway massacre and the Oklahoma City bombing that fanaticism under any religious cloak, whether Islamic, Christian or Jewish, has nothing to do with religion." UAE's Al Bayan says European countries should immediately reconsider their media policies and school curricula to take away all texts that encourage violence and hatred of others and the clash of civilizations. So the Bible and the Quran then, wicked, nice idea, mate. This is a guy from Iran, Banafsheh Golami. The deadly attacks in the Norwegian capital Oslo have engulfed the whole of European with right-wing terror. The rightist extremists of Europe should not be considered a different phenomenon from Al-Qaeda. Their tactics exhibited in the bombing and armed attack in Norway do not differ in nature from the attacks by Al-Qaeda. I mean, I think that's absolutely fantastic how the media are now comparing one man to Al-Qaeda, which, if I'm not mistaken, the US probably spends billions a day trying to fight. So I don't get it, and it is this kind of talk that basically terrorism is just all about extremism and not about faith. And it's so hard talking about Islam because I really don't. I used to be no holds barred. Islam's fucked. Most Muslims are arseholes. Let it all go. Most Muslims are cool, very nice people. Some of them have a bit of an issue with freedom of speech, which I don't really like. But when it comes to terrorism, they're a-okay. But why is it that these fucking fundamentalist arseholes who do this shit never get linked with Islam? And I think that's the massive problem here. So yeah, you know, when it comes down to terrorism, it is done by crazy people with ideologies. Breivik was a nationalist far-right arsehole, and the 6 guys in the 7/7 bombers were crazy motherfuckers who had a fetish for Islam. So yeah, peace out, and inshallah we can all live in peace. Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar.